The following podcast is brought to you by the Coswheel CT20 e-bike. Click on the link in the description and tell them I sent you if you buy one to support the channel. And then also you can support the channel by going to cdkeyoffer.com and using the offer code BrokenSilicon to save 25% on all Windows software. And we'll talk about these sponsors more later, but for now, let's just get on with the show. And welcome to Broken Silicon, a gaming hardware podcast. I am your host, Navi48 Tom, and today I am joined by my co-host,
Blackwell 103 Dan.
What if it was 203?
Oh, I shouldn't have said that at the beginning.
Get out of here now.
Oh, crap.
I'm not saying I'm 100% sure, but let's not get into it now. Obviously, I'm working on some leak or something. But welcome to a gaming hardware podcast, everybody. Welcome, Dan. How are you doing?
Pretty good, aside from accidentally swearing really early on into the podcast, which you're not supposed to do. But
what did you say?
The S word.
Oh, I guess I'll write that down to bleep that. Well, that tells you how little I actually care. That my brain didn't clock it. But
I've done that. I've done that one other time we were recording, and then you glared at me and said, "Oh, we need to start over."
I'll just have Gerard bleep it.
Okay.
You know, which we've done. I think I did with I was at the Colin. It was some recent podcast. I had him bleep it as well. I actually don't think YouTube usually cares. I mean, people usually say first 5 minutes you're safe. It honestly, to me, kind of seems like it's really like the first 30 seconds or something. And more so the first 30 seconds, they don't want you to go into a tirade. Just like 5 seconds. They don't want it so that a 5-year-old accidentally clicks on a video and it's just a string of insanity.
That's fair. I think that's fair. I also try to not swear as much as I used to on this podcast anyways, because it can come off as crass sometimes.
Indeed. But yeah, so wait, let me just get into some open reader mails here. No News writes in and says, Tom, when you worked at General Motors, what was your opinion of automotive industry leakers? Well, so honestly, I wasn't really interested in vehicles, dumb way to say it, cars, human vehicles with 4 wheels at all. When I started working, it's really working and seeing what goes into making a car that got me kind of, and you noticed that, Dan, interested in cars at all. I still wouldn't even call myself a car nut. Just I have interest in them, and I do look at that stuff every now and then. So when I started working at General Motors for the short amount of time I did, like it wasn't on my radar. And even by the end, even when I was interested in cars, by the end of it, my stint there, I didn't pay that much attention. Like, I was aware of the effort we put into avoiding them. Like, people will find this funny. If you think, like, it's crazy what some people go through to get leaks in this industry, it honestly is very tame. I mean, there's people that would rent out helicopters with cameras with lenses on them as long as sniper rifles and fly around the General Motors test track. And then General Motors had to look into, like, can we call the Air Force? Like, this isn't legal that they're flying a helicopter, but how do we stop this? Like there is insane amounts of money people would put into actually stealing information from General Motors, Ford, and so on and so forth. And for the most part, that's what I found interesting. And anything besides that, it was like, oh, look at that. I guess they're making that. I didn't really care, and I didn't pay that much attention to it. And if anything, I was like, it's interesting that's what the competitor's working on. And to my honest to God opinion, that is my impression of most people at AMD, Intel, and especially, by the way, people I talk to at Nvidia. They don't really care about leaks because they don't leak. If someone else in their company leaks, they don't actually think it usually hurts them that much. And if it does, they see themselves as part of a machine of tens of thousands of people. And so I don't know. They're like, I don't know why he leaked that, but this is an interesting article. It's honestly something I don't think most people at these companies think about unless they're in upper management, and even then it's rare that I think they care that much.
And with when you were working there, Don't they like paint their test models with like
it's like a zebra
World War II,
camo,
like boat camouflage? Yeah.
It's like a zebra pattern that makes it hard for digital cameras to focus.
Well, no, it's the okay. I thought it was just
That's
the
what
same
I was told when I
strategy.
was there.
Well, to my memory, it's also just the same strategy as like what boats in World War II did. They have those like zebra print things because it breaks up the shape of it.
It breaks up the shape, but some of the bizarre, it's not, they call it zebra print. It's not zebra. It's like a weird pattern.
Mm-hmm.
And I was told some cameras have trouble focusing quickly when it's in motion.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And there are patterns that do that.
I don't know if it's that true anymore. I mean, I've seen so many high quality leaked zebra print cars on the, you know, car versions of WCCF Tech that clearly someone can get a good enough camera. But
I'm surprised people haven't started like devising paint patterns that like actually mess with like encode information or something, so it messes up digital photos or something. That's going to happen at some point, I bet.
Well, you know, you'll find this funny. I don't remember when, but I want to say it was in the past month. Me and Emma, my girlfriend, were like, I don't remember what we were doing, why we were out, what it was about, but in a parking lot, I saw a zebra, and it's often not paint. It's often they have a tape they just wrap around the car too, on it, and it was just in a parking lot, and I was like, oh, look at that car, and she goes, what about it? And I'm like, yeah. She said it looks funny. I'm like, that's a camouflage like that we would use to hide this from cameras. So either someone's just been given the okay to test drive this outside of a facility that's guarded, or this is a form of guerrilla marketing by one of these companies.
or the alternate thing is there's a person that really, really values their privacy on the road.
I guess that's true. I have no reason. I'm sure you could just buy that on Amazon. I guess I didn't consider that maybe someone just did that themselves.
Yeah.
All right. Techno writes in and he says, return of the whiteboard for February. And I assume he means I used to, especially when I lived in Peoria, have like a whiteboard of things I was working on to the side. And so people would sometimes try to zoom in and figure out what's coming next. And I mean, honestly, it's just down there below this table, and I just haven't finished setting up this studio. Like, I need to set this up. I actually don't know if the whiteboard will be in view the way this room is set up. I actually suspect it won't be.
Yeah, I mean, people obviously haven't seen the studio, and I've been in that room before, obviously. I think it's probably like 50% bigger of a room than you would guess the room actually is. Like it's
not
massive
small. There's like a whole testing area over there. There's another table that way. And what you're seeing looks very organized. All chaos at the borders of this if I zoomed out.
Yes, he has perfectly positioned his camera to not see the chaos in the room.
Exactly.
That's all to say, I don't really know where you would put the whiteboard unless you just put it on the wall behind you. And I think that's kind of too obvious.
Which that was always a happy kind of tongue-in-cheek Easter egg joke that appeared. Like, I didn't think about it. I'm not an idiot. I was aware in some videos you could see the whiteboard, but I would just check and go, there's nothing that crazy on there. And then over time, it kind of became funny to have sneak Easter eggs on there. But I never put the whiteboard there going, I mean, I used it before. Remember, when the first 2 years of this channel, 2019, I guess year and a half, well, almost 2 years of this channel, I still worked at an automotive company while doing the channel. So I was using that whiteboard at first just for work stuff too. And it just turned into that. But I never set out to have this goofy whiteboard to mess with people. It just turned into that. I thought it was funny. I was like, well, I don't know. I nailed it to the wall here. I'm not going to move it. I'll just make sure I don't explicitly write something crazy on it. And if you were to be able to see it again, it would be because I think that's a good location to have it, not because I'm trying to be goofy or something.
Not because you're trying to hint at what you're making next.
No. All right. Let us now move on to some corrections, which of course you can submit if you support us on Patreon. Nvidia CEO God King Jensen Wang writes in and says, Tom, in Broken Silicon 243, you mentioned that Starfield didn't bump Game Pass sales. And that was an issue with people not wanting Game Pass. If people were not willing to get Game Pass to play Starfield for free, then they would never be willing to. However, a Bethesda game, one like Starfield that's similar to Elder Scrolls or Fallout, is one of those games where I think Game Pass gives you the least value. These kind of games tend to be played for years, if not over a decade. Is that not the worst kind of game to sell as a subscription to when you're definitely going to get your money's worth just owning it anyways. Yeah, I agree. And I actually had some of my, but before I even said that, I believe, I guess I don't remember. It would have been around when some of those videos came out where I was talking about that. Some of my contacts, just behind the scenes, like Wargaming, saying, hey, this is what I plan to talk about. I don't know if you've heard anything about this. They would go, Starfield isn't the best game for Game Pass anyways, because that's one of those long games you just want to buy on your own. So this is something I've thought about before. And I agree. Having said that, though, well, then what's the other game? I mean, Halo didn't boost Game Pass much, and Starfield didn't at all, as far as we can tell. And I don't think the point is that we would have expected Starfield to like double Game Pass subs. It's just that it doesn't seem to have literally moved the needle at all, which I do think is damning. Even that type of a game not moving the needle at all is very damning. And we've already seen Halo and Starfield not save Game Pass. So my argument simply would just be, well, then what game would? What's the perfect game? The point still stands.
I mean, yeah, I guess you could make the argument that the two big games are, one is Halo. I mean, Halo's kind of like, it's not really, there's live service elements. I don't know if I want to go out and say it's a live service game. And then Starfield is a game that you're supposed to play for many hours. So I guess you could argue both of those games aren't good for it.
Well, and you can play Halo multiplayer for free, technically.
That's true. Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. So, but like maybe the ideal game for it that they're going to have and that could move the needle is like Hellblade 2. Or a similar type of game, because that I'm assuming won't be longer than 12 hours. So that's a good game for a month.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe if there's a really good marketing push for it, for Hellblade 2, it will drive Game Pass sales. But I mean, I'm just speculating here because that's the last type of game you can really test to see if it moves the needle for Game Pass.
But just to be clear though, I don't think we really need to see more games to know if it's going to move the needle too much here. I think it would have to be one of those things where, like, despite all evidence right now, in 4 years we look back and go, well, finally it all added up and there's like 40 million plus subscribers to Game Pass just because there's been a dozen games. I think we've seen enough individual games that it won't be one. Like Lies of P, again, this is what Google's telling me, so don't get mad at me if this is wrong. But I'm seeing like Lies of P is on there. Of course, Forza's on there. I'm seeing a few other large AAA games that are on there. So they don't need to be exclusives. There's like dozens of games that some of them AAA that are, and if not AA, that are on Game Pass already. And Starfield was one of the most hyped up games ever. So I would just go, there's enough games on there to say that, the point stands. It doesn't seem like one big release is going to work. It seems like fundamentally they would need dozens and dozens of more games for this to move the needle at all. And I would argue there's enough games on there where I'm not sure how many it would take, because it's like there's a small amount.
Yeah, and Lies of P is a good example to bring up because there was a really big, I don't know if the marketing push was that big, but there was a really big spread of word of mouth of that game that it was actually like a good Souls-like game that wasn't made by From Software. And it's not incredibly long, so that goes against the other criticism he has. So Lies of P is also probably a decent test case, and if Lies of P didn't increase Game Pass sales for a month, yeah, I don't know.
In addition to, like, I think there's a Doom on there and something else and something else and something else. It's like, I just kind of seems like it would have to be something fundamental happens where, like, in 5 years, finally people notice there's 1,000 games and that's what makes it happen. Or it doesn't seem like they need 10% more games or like one more big game to make it gain momentum.
Yeah.
And QH Freddy writes in, and he says, in Broken Silicon 243, Colin Moriarty discusses the value on the consumer side in terms of price per hour of entertainment provided by games and how that should relate to the price. I think this is a flawed model because it doesn't account for the fact that for a given amount of work, games usually generate more entertainment hours, while films and such condense the artistic work into a much shorter runtime. Right? He's saying, Colin's point was, we spend at least $5 to rent a movie on Amazon, if not $10, $20 if it's a new release. We'll spend over $20 going to a movie theater, and that's 2 hours for $20 sometimes. Whereas a game, you pay $70 or $40 and you get sometimes 20 or 100 hours of playtime. So what are we really complaining about when it comes to game prices? And I would say there's just two things here. Number one, QH Freddy, yes, I agree. But I would suspect Colin skipped over making that clear because the difference is just so drastic that the point stands. Or at least at a minimum, that's my argument I would make, right? I pay $6 to rent a movie, usually I think on Amazon, and usually the movie's under 2 hours. So like if it was $6 for 1.5 hours, you're getting like, what is it, $4 an hour of entertainment? Okay, well, 70-hour game like Elden Ring, or I think that was it. That one was even 60. I mean, that's 100 hours plus. I think I put over 200. Actually, I put 300 hours into Elden Ring by now, actually. Like we're talking, if it was 100 hours, 70 cents per hour. I mean, yes, the movie entertainment was more condensed, and I think worth paying more per hour for. I do think that. But we're talking about a 6x change. Even if you'd say it's twice, 3 times as valuable, it's still cheaper to play games. And I mean, for every game that felt like you wasted some time, how many movies or shows have we watched where we're like, I'm never getting that hour back or something? And you paid $20 to go to that movie in a theater.
Or my recent fun experience of renting a movie and it just not having subtitles on it for some reason. That was
we didn't talk about that on the show yet, did we?
No.
I mean, bring it up because this is hilarious. I think bring it up.
So I wanted to watch Anatomy of a Fall, and the first scene, there was some French dialogue in it, but it's like a kid speaking to his dog. So I was like, okay, maybe it's not important. And then there was a little bit more French a little bit later, and I thought maybe they were just like saying something, like it was like basic pleasantries. So once again, maybe it's nothing. And then like 20 minutes into the movie, it cuts to a coroner's office and they're speaking French. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure this is important. And I looked it up, and yeah, apparently that's a problem with some of the distros or something of Anatomy of a Fall, is some people just can't turn on subtitles for some reason when they rent it.
Including in theaters in the United Kingdom, you said?
Yes. Some people in the United Kingdom said that. Yeah.
How does that happen?
I don't know. I genuinely don't know. I don't know if the distributor just screwed something up or what. But
why is it sometimes? And again, we're not going to dig into this. Maybe it's just one theater got a bad distro, but it would be hilarious to me if just like there's like some server clearly, but also for the movie theater somehow, where I thought they transported those, and I'm sure someone's going to write in and tell me I'm an idiot, but like on like these like copyright protected individual like SSD things that they use now in theaters. I thought I again, do not kill me if they're just literally logging into some version of Amazon and that's how movie theaters work. I don't think that's how they work, but like I don't understand how both of them could have the same issue, because that would mean they sent the theater the wrong version, and sometimes on Amazon they pull from the wrong server and there's no way to fix it. Once you've rented it, you're screwed. That doesn't make any sense to me. It also doesn't make any sense to me why there'd be like, why wouldn't they just have one version? But I think sometimes they just render multiple versions of a movie, I guess. Probably, right? When you change subtitles, they might literally be pulling from a different server.
I have no clue how that works, to be honest, on the back end. So I can't even begin to know what's causing that, or if it's limited to this movie, I guess. And maybe this was just the first time I got unlucky. But I looked it up and I found multiple like Reddit posts of people saying that they couldn't turn on subtitles in the movie. And the funniest one is they still have closed captioning subtitles. But when you turn down the closed caption subtitles, when it says when they're speaking French, instead of translating it like most closed caption subtitles do, it just says in parentheses, speaking French.
Right. Did it, when they were speaking English, show English? It doesn't really matter, because even if you were a deaf French person, that doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I know.
Or not deaf. Some people just want to watch a movie with subtitles on.
I know. It was crazy to me, but
that's hilarious. But what's also really funny is how many people I saw online say they did the same thing you did. They like watched for 10, 20 minutes before they were like, okay, this has to be a mistake. All right.
We're talking about movies too much.
Allegedly, this is a gaming hardware podcast, so we should eventually get to some of the main stories. And that first one is story number 1. RTX 4080 Super final thoughts. Here's the write-up. A couple weeks ago, like we did throughout all of January, it seems, this channel released our initial review of the 4080 Super early, following a quick glance at benchmarks TechTuber peers of us sent to us ahead of time. And also there was a day one analysis as well. And generally speaking, we basically found that the fact that it loses to the 7900 XTX and raster to be something that everyone needs to realize when they consider this card as a valuable improvement over the 4080. There's still the cheaper XTX, higher raster performance, and with 50% more RAM. And we also suspected that it would sell well immediately because of how many people were giving up on getting a 4090 for a reasonable price. It would just get this instead. But then we also expected the sales to slow down and that it would be shocking if it didn't sell out within the first couple of weeks on sale. Now, the early analysis of sales seemingly confirmed this, as we can see that the 4080 Super finally did sell out right about now, it seems, everybody. But indeed, what I reported in my initial analysis was morning sales of the 4080 Super were incredibly good, and they just fell off a cliff, and it was easy to buy one for days. I don't know actually when it sold out, but it did recently. But it needs to be emphasized. That's not that impressive, considering that I was told the supply for the 4080 Super was slightly better than like Ampere paper launch levels. So yeah, here we are in the middle of February for our final thoughts on the 4080 Super. And during this time, the 7900 XTX seems to be maintaining its price between $900 and $950. The 7900 XT seems to be staying below $750 most of the time and picking up in sales. And the 4080 Super is finally sold out. And AMD just reported fantastic Radeon sales again in their latest earnings. So clearly, if Nvidia's sales are improving, AMD's aren't bad. Dan, do we have anything else left to say about the 4080 Super?
I mean, once again, if at the same price, I think the 4080 Super now becomes better than the 7900 XTX. And the 4080 Super is a much needed correction, but all it is a hidden correction, right? And so if they can keep the price of the 7900 XTX close to $900, I think it's still edges out as the better option. Although I don't think there's a huge difference in value if ray tracing is something that you value with the 4080 Super versus the XTX.
Yeah, I don't know. From where I'm sitting, I just think the performance is a washout. Like XTX wins by 3-5% in raster. 4080 definitely wins 20 to 30% in ray tracing, but not all games. There's games where the XTX is just as good, but not a hair better in ray tracing. So it's not like you can always be sure of that. They're almost within the same tier of ray tracing, but there's extreme examples that make the 4080 on average better by more than just double digits. And then I go, well, if I think the performance is almost a washout, I'd say the 50% RAM bonus for the 7900 XTX, which I do think will matter in the next couple of years in some stuff. I honestly do, people. I think that kind of makes it just in favor of the XTX at the same price. DLSS is the only thing. That's it. Once again, I mean, and therefore, if you make the 7900 XTX 10% cheaper, I'd still recommend it over the 4080 Super. Honest to God, I would.
Yeah, 50%
it's almost more RAM.
It's almost just a question of whatever market you're in, which one is cheaper. Get that one.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think that's fair to point out that the 4080 Super is, I think, a bit more energy efficient than the 7900 XTX, although I don't remember how big of a difference.
I don't think it's that big of a difference, though. I mean, it's it is more efficient, but it isn't I don't know.
And it does also depend on how long you're intending to keep it for, because these are high-end cards. 16 gigabytes of RAM isn't terrible for where we're at right now, and I don't think it will ever be a massive issue if you only keep it for 2 years. But if you keep it for 3+ years, I could see it starting to become an issue in some games with a card that's, it's supposed to be the second best card on the market. So
yeah, this isn't, again, it's this isn't we're talking about the difference between 20 and 16 gigabytes at $600 or something. We're talking about the difference between, which I'm not saying those are cards that exist. I'm just saying that is where it would be well, whatever, you're getting a mid-range card. We're talking about $1,000 products, It's odd to me to think it's even debatable that you should ever have to worry about RAM for years at that price. These are Titan prices. It should last for a very long time without having to worry about silly things like that, I think.
Yeah.
Cyber Cookie writes in, and he says, with the Super release and all the cards coming with 16 gigabytes of RAM, I feel that the 4080 Super has missed a big opportunity to go with 20 gigabytes and really help take market share for its price point. But add 20 gigabytes, I feel like it'd be a lot more tempting to go for. Yeah, I mean, 20, 24, if it had more RAM, I think If it had if it had the same amount of RAM as the 7900 XTX, I would recommend it even for a little more money. I mean, I would. I'd go, all right, really ray tracing better, RAM same deal. Like then it becomes obvious, but it doesn't have that. Also, though, CyberCookie, they can't do that. It's using 8103, so it's limited to 16 gigabytes unless they clamshelled to 32 or some new RAM density came onto the market. And if new RAM density did come onto the market, it would probably push to 24 gigabytes. So
yeah,
so they cannot do that.
The only reality that I don't know if it would be possible is if it was from a disabled 8102, maybe they could, but
which they're currently selling for $2,000 to $10,000. I don't think so.
yeah, that's true. They're not going to put that in a $1,000 product unless, you know, they can sell a lot, unless a lot of those need to be disabled or something,
and cannot be sold for $5,000. Again, it's like all of those rumors about a 20 gigabyte 4080 Ti. I'm like, I don't need a source. It's not happening. As long as the 4090 is unable to buy below MSRP, they will not do that. It does not make any sense.
Yeah. I was just saying, I think the only hypothetical scenario where that could be the case is if there were a lot of manufacturing issues with it and they had to disable a huge amount of them a lot. Maybe then it would get to the 48.
I mean, it would have to be a catastrophic amount.
30, yes.
So it would have to be like if Samsung, for example, could not hit the yields they promised Nvidia and then gave them 102 pricing. They gave them 102 at 103 pricing. The joke I'm making is that's what happened with Ampere. So there was a GA 103 with Ampere that was 320-bit that was supposed to be the 3080 and be 10% weaker for less money. But that's all water under the bridge now. We got into the situation of Nvidia making everyone expect to get a cut down 102 die as the 80. And the only way they do that is if they're giving it for free from Samsung or TSMC, basically. Right, QH Freddy writes in and he says, what's Nvidia's plan with the 4090? Are they going to try to keep it at $2,000 now to capitalize on AI-driven demand, with the 4080 Super providing the competition against the 7900 XTX? From what I hear, I mean, the 4090 can get closer to MSRP by April once they start pushing more of those back on the consumer space again after stuffing the Chinese channels. But at the end of the day, I think what Nvidia is hoping is that the 4080 Super at MSRP is selling well enough that even if sales suffer a little bit more than they would, it doesn't matter. They would rather the 4090, all of the stock for that can be turned into AI cards, which is making them so much more money. They just do that for the time being. I expect the price to come down a little bit in 2 months, but I still think that the 4080 Super did not sell well enough that Nvidia is going to abandon the 4090 supply, but it's still sold just well enough where I think they're still going to try shoving more 4080 Supers out there and seeing if people buy into them, even if they drift a little below MSRP if supply increased a lot. I think Nvidia would much rather be, again, remember, 8102, the die used for the 4090 is over 50% bigger than the die used for the 4080, I believe, right? So, I mean, they'd rather sell you two 4080 Supers than one 4090 that could be sold for $5,000 as another card in the AI market. And therefore, I think they'd even be okay if the 4080 Super drifted to $950 over selling you a 4090 for MSRP, because they would just make more money doing that. QH Freddy writes in yet again. He says, how long can AMD go with 7700 XT pricing? Or how low can they go at 7700 XT pricing? How much are they paying for the packaging cost? Well, I'm not going to break apart a bomb right now here and exactly how much it costs, but what I've been told is, and this comes after a sudden price drop for like a flash of a second, apparently the 7700 XT was like almost $350 on Newegg and is not anymore to my knowledge. I guess I should check because if it hit this again, I guess I'd have to fundamentally actually change what my opinion is on this. But looking here, no, it's $450 or $430 at the lowest right now where I'm looking. So I asked around on this. Is this AMD testing the waters of lower prices like they did before? And most of the answers I got was they think a couple AIBs screwed something up, or Newegg did. And like they sold like a very small amount of cards actually at that price, but honored them because it was their mistake. So my understanding, and then after that, what I'm told is basically anything below $400 for the 7700 XT hurts pretty bad for AMD, and they don't really want to go lower than 430. So any official price drop to the 7700 XT, I would be surprised if they ever dropped it officially below $400 for the time being. I think they made the amount they're going to make. They've put aside those bad yields, and they're probably just going to shift as much as they can to other products like the 7800 XT and just let that dry up at like 430 over time. I don't think they're going. I would not. I'd be shocked if 350 became a real thing.
Yeah, I mean, if that's the case, then no, it's not going to be a real thing. Maybe later down the road we'll see it go to 400. But
yeah, and I'm trying to think of the difference in cost. Yeah, I think 400 is the lowest they would want to go. Donald Kerner writes in and says, do you think the 7900 GRE being sub 550 euros is a good sign for what is to come with RDNA 4? I've seen an article here from Video Cards. Oh, yeah, I saw that one. He says, doesn't this show that AMD can sell the 7900 XT for a profit even at sub 600, as this isn't that much more cut down? No. Right. The 7900 GRE has less RAM, and it does have 2 dummy MCDs in it, despite being 256-bit. But I believe those are MCDs that failed yields anyways. This card is using MCD yields, to my understanding, that are like the 1% of bad yields set aside over 2 years, like a year manufacturing. And I've heard like the initial launch was like less than 5,000 in China. Like these are like barely any of these were manufactured whatsoever. So no, I think you've got to remember less RAM, cheaper BOM, board costs, and the fact that they're making barely any of them. No, they can't sell the 7900 XT for any less than that. And I think what this shows you, though, is if they can sell this for 550 euros, then they could sell the 8800 XT for that. So my answer is yes, this does indicate the 8800 XT could probably cost that much, but not because the 7900 XT can. It's because this is a different card that costs less to make.
And the GRE is just the GRE stuff is just them selling bad yields, I think.
All right. This piece of content is brought to you by the Coswheel CT20 e-bike. Over the past few weeks, I've been able to test the CT20 fairly extensively, and that's both because I wanted to, but because I kind of had to. Completely by coincidence, my car has been in the repair shop for the past few weeks, and while I can, of course, borrow my girlfriend's car, sometimes I actually can't. She needs to use it for something where I am not going to or at, and I just needed this to go somewhere. And I have to say, the CT20, if you're someone who wants to use this to go to the corner store or the grocery store, even places miles away, I think this is a decent option for those sorts of people that live in a city or especially like a dense, smaller town. Like, you don't need to go over 28 miles per hour, but you also don't want to get all sweaty or go somewhere, try to get something and not be able to bring it home. This bike has an insane range. It goes up to 87 miles in a single charge. And then if it were to run out of battery, you can still keep pedaling. So this is something that has like real vehicle-like range, and you never have to fill up with gas, which is really cool. However, I do have to caution, it is not a motorcycle. And even if I like to pretend it was one, it isn't. And I used to ride motorcycles in Detroit, Michigan when I lived there. So I know the difference between a fancy bike and an actual motor vehicle. And that's the distinguishing thing I'd say about this. It is not a budget motorcycle. What it is like a god tier bike that has the utility of a motorcycle if you don't need to go as fast. It can actually carry a lot of stuff. Like it has a basket built in for groceries. It can carry multiple people on the seat. It doesn't just have a bicycle seat. Then this is the thing for you. Although also, this is something that you should only get if you're comfortable working on it with a decent amount of skill yourself. It comes mostly assembled. Then you have to finish the assembling. The directions online are there, but they're limited. And I actually had to go through and tighten and check some screws and stuff to just make sure everything was perfectly ready to go. It's not something I think anyone who's owned a motorcycle before would really care about, nor somebody who works on their own bicycles. But it is something you'll probably have to do. And yeah, I guess anyways, though, that gets me to my final conclusion. This bike, the CT20, it is for somebody who knows how to work on a bike or something, but then also wants a fancy bike with god-tier electric range. The sort of range that, from what I can tell online, would usually cost thousands of dollars more, or it would come in a bike that is much smaller, lighter, and doesn't have the utility to carry multiple people and groceries home on it like it's a motorcycle. It's not a motorcycle, but it does have the utility of a motorcycle for the people that want that in an e-bike that doesn't cost like $4,000. So yeah, I do recommend it for people like that. And if you are interested in this product, please go to the link in the description and purchase it. You will be directly supporting me if you do. Support this channel by checking out the Coswheel CT20 today. Moving on to our second story for this episode, with probably the biggest one. Well, actually, we'll discuss at the end if this is the biggest one. Actually, I don't know if I would say this is the biggest one, but it's a big one. Story number 2, Moore's Law is dead leaks Navi 48 and Navi 44 details, Blackwell whispers, and even GDDR7 insider info. Late Friday night, yours truly finally got around to codifying what gamers should expect from RDNA 4 products later this year. In summary, indeed, there are 2 dies, Navi 48 and Navi 44, and they are both monolithic from TSMC's N4P node. They also seem likely to boost above 3 gigahertz with good samples and may even hit 3.3 gigahertz, although I'm not confirming. I think they will. But 3.5 gigahertz, from what I'm told, seems out of the question at this point. They have FP8, matrix hardware, and likely sparsity support for AI as well. And AMD is going around directly, multiple sources, AMD is going around to notebook OEMs right now, bragging about the AI performance for future AI PCs of RDNA 4. Now, Navi 48, to be specific, this die has a 256-bit bus, 16 gigabytes of VRAM, and utilizes in 300 to 350 millimeter square die, or close to that, to performance at least around a 7900 XT or better. But most sources do expect it to be unlikely to beat the 7900 XTX firmly in raster. Could it trade blows, do better in newer games, and be better than it in ray tracing? Sure, but most people are seeing this as having performance like in between the 7900 XT and XTX from what I'm hearing. Meanwhile, Navi 44 utilizes a small, less than 210 millimeter squared 4 nanometer die that has a 128-bit bus and is likely to perform well above a 7600 XT, but also probably well below a 7800 XT. For now, put a gun to my head, I would say, I don't know, I think it's going to be close to a 6750 XT or 7700 XT. And I think if it, with a 128-bit bus, managed to hit 7700 XT performance, that'd actually be a wild accomplishment too. And in general, though, RDNA 4 seems plausible to launch in Q3 of this year, according to some of my sources, but generally, it seems like Q4 is what people should more likely expect for now, due to excellent RDNA 3 sales and the fact that the 5090, not the 5070, which is supposed to compete with this, they think, by the way, is expected to launch from Nvidia this year only in late Q4, meaning that whatever is out now, if AMD beat it decently in performance or price performance in where it is, they don't really have to worry about anything else. So there's, if there's just a 5090 at the end of this year for like $2,000 or whatever, AMD really doesn't have a reason to launch this sooner rather than later. They still expect to beat Blackwell to market, or at least launch next to it. And again, RDNA 3 selling well. And and it sounds like these products are going to use GDDR6, and that everything else probably will too that uses GDDR besides Blackwell until at least late next year. As I've been told from speaking to people like Micron, Hynix, and Samsung, that basically GDDR7 is only being bought up for future, like buying up future sales of GDDR7, like reserving them is the word. Only Nvidia is doing that right now. So any AMD product or anyone else who would use GDDR7, this wouldn't be something they're planning to do right now. At a minimum, I'd expect the initial RDNA 4 cards to be using GDDR6, and for that matter, 20 gigabit per second GDDR6, because a lot of people were pretty angrily telling me that Samsung's high performance GDDR6 speeds, like, well, I don't know what, I think they said like up to 27 gigabit per second or something ridiculous. They said fake, basically. Like not in any yields, anything could reasonably use in high volume, and certainly not for good price performance. All right, so what did you think of this, Dan?
I mean, this is around aligns with like the expectations that have been being set for a while now. So it's not like I feel wildly different about it, even though it's interesting to see what the specs will actually look like. I don't like that it's going to only 16 gigs of RAM and be close to the 7900 XTX in performance, though. And hopefully the addition of like Matrix hardware will allow them to kickstart or kick into gear FSR more so, or fluid frames more so than they have in the past.
A lot of people think they will, like they might be preparing some FSR 4 for RDNA 4. That's plausible.
Because that's, I think, the most needed thing from AMD graphics cards is they don't really even need to increase raster right now for over what the 7900 XTX has for hell, maybe even 2 gens. I honestly wouldn't care if they were improving the other stuff instead. Because I've said this before, I don't think anyone really needs what the 5090 is probably going to offer, because the 4090 is already such a ridiculously powerful card.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. I was responding to some people in the YouTube comments today, like right before getting to work on the script. And I don't remember who it was. There was someone who basically said, oh, so AMD isn't even iterating next gen. And I said, yeah, they are. They're iterating on efficiency, ray tracing, and price to performance, not on pure raster performance increases. And the reason is, I think that's what everybody's been asking for. Everyone's been begging for better price performance. And I think people have been forgetting that, well, yes, Nvidia likes to have extra high margins for their graphics cards. To this day, from what I'm told, the 4090 costs probably around $900 to make before any markup whatsoever, if not over $1,000. And that the 4080 probably costs between $700 and $800, $600 to $800 to manufacture. So this idea that Nvidia would sell a 4080 for $600, they would not be making a profit. People, they wouldn't be making a profit if they did that. And then you would go, well, why did they make it so expensive? Because they're in the lead and they want to make it more expensive. They want to make it the best at everything, and they're willing to charge for it, and they think they can get away with it. So the only alternative is to have a company try to design it to be cheaper. It has to be designed that way to be cheaper, because these things are getting really expensive and complex. And that's where you see something like GDDR6. Yeah, AMD's going with, it seems like at least, 20 gigabit per second GDDR6 over 256-bit bus, because that's the cheapest way to get to a 16 gigabyte card with tons of supply. And if they were to go GDDR7 early, I mean, everyone here, why would they use GDDR7 for something meant to be a cheap product? I mean, it's going to be like when GDDR7's coming out, they'll be bidding against Nvidia for the use of GDDR7. That really doesn't make any sense. I'm sure they wish they could have used faster memory, but apparently, there really isn't faster memory than 20 gigabit per second for GDDR6 right now. And yeah, I mean, if AMD planned to use GDDR7 for the top configurations of RDNA 4, but those are canceled, and this is what's left, and they're just going to make these the best they can. But yeah, it's designed to do that surgically, right?
And if this launch is done correctly and marketed correctly, which it's an AMD graphics video, so God knows that will happen, but if it's done correctly, I think it could be really positively received by the market. The only thing that would concern me is if they sell this for like $600 and people complain because it's not a 7900. It's not an increase like this 7900 XTX from the 6900 XT. Yeah, XT. I'm
6950 XT.
Yeah, 6950 XT. Yeah, sorry. We're not seeing that type of improvement, and what people, I'm worried that what people online might want is that the 8900 XTX, and wow, it's only $600, because that's not going to happen.
I agree. It's the same reason the 7800 XT is like the best seller this gen, and it's because it hit $499. The number, not $529. At $549, they wanted to see $499. That's, even if you could argue it would have been justified at that price, that is the price people wanted to see. And so I agree. If they went for $600, the only way you can justify that is if it does legitimately manage to like beat the XTX overall on average in most averages. If it beats the XTX overall at 600, I think that's where people go, okay, I mean, this thing is priced the same as a 4070 Super with more RAM than a 4070 Super. And like, what would it be at that point? Like we're looking at 30%, 40% higher performance. That's fair. I'm going to buy this. But anything less than an XTX and raster, I think $499 needs to be where it is. And I think, again, if it's there, I think a lot of people would like it. Another thing I said to someone in the comments too is like, why would they not focus on top performance and putting aside the arguments about trying to focus their capacity for the PlayStation 5 Pro and Strix APUs and all this other stuff and AI chips that probably is more important to them right now. I think you've also got to think about like the people who bought a 4090 might go for a 5090, but unless you're sure you're going to launch on time with better software and something that can beat it wildly in price, performance, like I don't know that market's really there to upgrade to a budget 5090 right now. Like, if you think about it, I don't think anybody said, I'm not buying the 4090. It's not strong enough. Either they had the money for that or they didn't. That market is gone. It's saturated. They've saturated the top tier market. Those people probably won't be desperate for any more performance for years now. AMD missed their chance to take that. They lost to the 4090. So in the meantime, what is everyone saying? I want this $1,000 performance to be mid-range pricing. And that's really, if there was ever a gen to do this, it's this one.
Yeah. I mean, AMD wasn't able to fully capture the market. I mean, the Mindshare that they are an equal competitor to Nvidia because they can't get their feature set straight, and this fell short for a little bit in raster performance. So they need to regroup and be a solid mid-grade graphics card producer for one generation, and maybe they can come back and double performance again with RDNA 5.
And again, with how much people complained about Lovelace pricing, if there was ever a time to shake that tree of value where people are primed to respond positively, if you do, it'd be this one. You know what? On this note, Resident Mexican writes in and he says, hypothetically speaking, let's say that when RDNA 4 launches, every card in their lineup is better than NVIDIA's at every price point. Let's just say up and down the stack that AMD is competing in, they're better in price performance, RAM, ray tracing, FSR even ends up looking better than DLSS. The drivers are more stable. Let's say all of those things are just even 10% better, but it's all of them. I know for a fact people in the know would buy them in a heartbeat, but would the average gamer do so? Is the reason why the average gamer buys an NVIDIA card over an AMD card because of their better performance and feature set, or is it because of their mind share? It's a combination of both, and I'm going to just say, in do-it-yourself, my opinion, yes. Do-it-yourself, AMD would dominate do-it-yourself GPU sales if their lineup beat, let's say hypothetically, 8800 XT versus 5070. Let's say it was 10% stronger, including in ray tracing, cost 10% less, had a little more, like 4 gigabytes more of RAM, was more efficient, and FSR 4 puts DLSS to shame. If those things happen, I think it would get rave reviews. Everyone in do-it-yourself would buy it. I just do without a doubt think that. Now, I'm not going to get into laptop sales, but this gets into like relationships and stuff. But in do-it-yourself, where it is literally about choice, I think they would. However, it's not going to do all of those things, I don't think so.
No, that's not realistic. And for the average like hardware buyer, I mean, I don't know. I think NVIDIA is going to have the mind share with them for a long time, no matter what happens. But
I don't think their mind share is like at this place where it's just people will blindly buy it if it was literally like that.
No, or
you can see in polling that AMD is not regarded badly anymore.
Yeah, if it was like that, I mean, maybe in like 2018, if that had happened, maybe it would have gone unnoticed for a couple months, but eventually people would still have been like, hey, AMD's better this generation. This is what you should get. And a lot of people would switch to AMD after that. Mm-hmm. I just can't imagine something being unanimously better and cheaper not being the thing that people buy.
Yeah. And I think especially now, I mean, it's in AMD's earnings. The Radeon sales are up. So they have to charge less than NVIDIA, and they usually have to give more RAM here and there. But if they literally did everything better, I do think even if they fell short of matching NVIDIA mindshare in some circles this generation, it's still good enough where if they were just completely across the board better, I do think they have enough mindshare by now to sell well and do it yourself. Techno writes in, he says, do you think that the lowest end Blackwell card will beat Navi 43, the 8700 XT die? Oh, yeah. So you mean Navi 48? No. I think that GB204 is, and again, I'll get to my leaks when I get to them, like GB204 for the 5070, it's going to be like 30% faster than 8104 that was used for the 4070 Ti. But what does that put it at? I don't know, around a 4080. So no, I think the 5070 die is going to be competing most likely with Navi 48, and at a minimum, Navi 48 will be competitive with the 106, the 06 die. So I'm not really concerned about that at all. It's not like AMD is completely making a weak sauce generation to that degree. Steve Box TM writes in and says, hello, Tom and Dan. I was wondering how impactful you think the ray tracing lift will be in RDNA 4's top die. I have a 3090, and in the vast majority of games, I have no problem getting 4K 120, especially with quality DLSS enabled. Ray tracing looks great, but in games with high implementations of ray tracing, it definitely still brings them to unacceptable frame rates. I can't justify paying 4090 or even really 4080 prices for an upgrade right now, but do you think the 8800 XT of ray tracing capabilities that allow for 4K 120 gaming, or at least never below 60? Well, I don't like when you use the word never, because there's always going to be some insane game that's either unoptimized or looks so good that it crushes your PC. But also, could you please get Micro Center to build a store in Seattle? Tell them to build it in Nashville first, man. I don't know. We are starved for silicon and tired of getting shipped shitty DOA open box motherboards from Newegg passed off as brand new. Yeah, well, we'll see if I can remember. I will bring it up to them here and there. Like, dude, what's going on with some of these cities? But maybe I'll get a candid answer. But going to your actual question here, I mean, here's the problem I have: is everyone has a different opinion of like what it. I think only the 4090 in ray tracing is getting you to 4K 120 here with DLSS. Like, and again, some games with ray tracing on 4K 200. But there will be games that are not even 4K 100. So I don't like the never or always. Anytime you say never or always, there's so many variables here. I can't firmly say one way or the other. What I can say is, relatively speaking, look, RDNA 4 is going to have better ray tracing performance than RDNA 3. It does not sound like this is the one where they try to catch up, though. That sounds like RDNA 5. So if the 8800 XT is hypothetically as good as let's just say a 7900 XT, let's make it pessimistic this episode. Let's say it's as good as a 7900 XT in raster. Then in ray tracing, I would expect it to be between an XTX and a 4070 Ti, somewhere around there, so better per CU. But no, I don't think this is going to I'm not confident this will beat a 4080 in ray tracing, let alone even significantly beat the 4070 Ti. I just think it will be much better than before. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I want to see them improve on where they're at with ray tracing than versus where they've been, but I wouldn't expect it to just become a 4090 next gen. I mean, great if it does, but no expectation for that. And even the 4090, if you look at benchmarks, the 4090 is still brought to its knees in some games with ray tracing on.
I mean, that's only you make the settings dumb enough, you'll kill any product.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, maybe it will be good for ray tracing at 60 usually, but that's not that's not. We're not even at a place with that with any graphics card yet.
I think, and I'm kind of getting into this conversation here with you. Like, I wonder what you think it should be to really kind of remove people complaining about it. Like, let's say it's $500. 7900 XT performance. So that means they're bringing like a 40% price to performance increase over the 7800 XT at the same price point, gen over gen, if they did that. That'd be a pretty big deal, I think. What ray tracing do you think it would have to be at to really make people stop saying AMD is worse at ray tracing? Because it's hard, because if Nvidia hasn't dropped prices by them, it's like a weird situation where it's like, well, yeah, but I think the XTX is better than the 4070 Super in ray tracing, or at least close. So, I mean, would it have to be just below a 4080? Because at the price point they would go, it's really not even worse than Nvidia. It's actually better at the price point. Like, at what point do they go? It's still, because that's the minimum, I think, is where it at least dwarfs its Nvidia counterpart in ray tracing.
Because I mean, I think people would stop saying it. So if it were at the same price point and it were getting the same ray tracing and you just had that extra raster added as a cherry on top, there would be nothing to complain about. But you would still see people talk about it until it was better, at least than the 4070 Ti Super or something.
Carrie Knows Who Gotta writes in, and he says, with AMD being relaxed about current market conditions for GPUs, we probably won't see Navi 48 before Q4 unless Nvidia starts putting more pressure on them. That could be the difference between an aggressively priced Navi 48 coming as soon as it is ready and one coming out in the peak Christmas buying season at a higher price. But with that in mind, do you have any idea how Nvidia feels about the launch of the Super series so far? They just don't talk about it much. I mean, I think the general sentiment at Nvidia is, all right, maybe we were too cocky once again with how well it would be perceived, but it has improved sales at least a little bit, and it's too early to say if this wasn't enough. Sales have gone up a bit. It's helped, but no, we have not fixed the issue. It's the general sentiment I get. But they don't really bring it up, so they don't seem worried.
Well, yeah, the problem with it, I think potentially, is that it's just too little too late. And like you've mentioned this on the last podcast, it doesn't change things enough to where I think there's a huge market for people that haven't bought the thing yet would have bought it now. Like, or like the thing it's replacing. And that's the main issue with it, I think.
Yeah, exactly. So it's better. It can only help, but it's almost like a situation where it's raising Nvidia sales, but also increasing RDNA 3 sales.
Yeah.
Like at long term, possibly, just because everything's a bit better now. So everyone's shopping more. Bfish36 writes in and he says, with your recent RDNA 4 leak and the knowledge that Strix Point is coming later this year, what are you hearing from OEMs for AMD and laptops? I imagine the lack of a super refresh in laptop means at least Nvidia was fine with their sales numbers or didn't feel threatened by AMD. Are we going to see Strix paired with GPUs in a decent number of models, or will it be like Phoenix with the only difference being the addition of Strix Halo models next year? Which I hope they don't put Strix Halo in only Asus Tough, unless Tough gets a lot more up market. Everyone seems pretty excited about Strix and AMD APUs in their laptops in general, like at least more excited than they were in the past. So there's good sentiment there. Having said that, I wouldn't say RDNA 4 is doomed in laptop, but at least no OEMs are talking about it, man. And AMD is pitching to them right now. So will some OEMs use RDNA 4? I think some of them will, but do I think that this is going to be the one that changes everything for AMD? Press X to doubt. I think it's all about APUs. That's how AMD gets more laptop market share.
Yeah, and I mean, even we'll see if this actually happens. I mean, Strix Halo obviously will have to be not paired with a discrete GPU because there's almost not a point to doing that. But I think even Strix Point is good enough where you don't need to pair it with a GPU. So that's their end.
Yeah, to really make a dent, I think against Nvidia, AMD would need to pair Hawk Point 8 cores with, with 16 gigabyte RDNA 4. Like, they could. This would be before Mobile Blackwell's out. Maybe if all I can confirm, by the way, is RDNA 4 Mobile will be ready in Q1 of next year. I'm not even sure it will be ready this year, but let's say they did it. Let's say they rushed it out even to laptop. And so they don't have to worry about NVIDIA Blackwell laptops to compete with yet. That the killer feature would be if they could sell a Hawk Point like 8945 or whatever it is HS laptop CPU with a 16 gigabyte, whatever they call it, 8900M that they can compare to the 4090 laptops favorably. And then they could sell that whole thing for $1,500 or less. Like that, I think they need to cut. But I just don't know if they could do that. So that is what they would need to do, because it's very clear that having a card that costs $100 less than NVIDIA doesn't make the overall laptop cost enough lower where people pay attention, it seems.
Yeah, right? Because you're buying a full package with a laptop.
Yeah. All right. Let us then move on away from the PC side of things to the console side of things with story number 3. PlayStation 5 Pro confirmed. Hot off the heels of this channel confirming the PS5 Pro ourselves, which as a reminder was a 4nm 8-core Zen 2 CPU which in this APU also has up to 60 compute units of an RDNA 3 based GPU, but also with higher RDNA 4, maybe parts of RDNA 5. I don't know. Custom GPU architecture. It's mostly RDNA 3, right? Just like Xbox Series X and PlayStation 5 are mostly RDNA 2, although you can see interesting compute things in Series X that seems to be from a later gen and something with the geometry engine. And getting to that, though. Also, 16 gigabytes of 18 gigabit per second GDDR6. And again, because from a recent leak I put out with RDNA 4, it seems like only 18 gigabit per second is the one Micron, Hynix, and Samsung can all manufacture for the next few years. And if you're Sony,
that's what you're
saying. They love faster RAM, but they want to bid them against each other for the lowest cost. So they're not choosing faster than that for that reason. And this should be coming out in holiday of 2024. So again, I leaked that I could confirm these things. And then Colin Moriarty on the last episode of Broken Silicon, someone who has lunch with Neil Druckmann, the creator of The Last of Us, regularly. He says he knows multiple people who have been briefed on the PS5 Pro. So I'd say that's it. PS5 Pro is coming this year. Oh boy. We basically know what it's aiming to do. And from the sounds of it too, I'm not hearing any developers complain. So it sounds like it is a very, very easy thing to patch and support for. At least so far, that's what it sounds like at a minimum. Dan, what do you think about this?
Oh, I mean, yeah, good. That's good. That was the big thing people were worried about when the PS4 Pro came out. So hearing that that's already not an issue is great. And I mean, am I wrong? This doesn't sound like, now that I'm thinking about it, it doesn't sound like it's that much, not that much smaller of an improvement than the PS4 to PS4 Pro, really. Like, I think this will enable the console to be at either just way higher frame rates at the same settings or be able to push some games to 4K.
I think it's a tamer upgrade personally.
It's definitely tamer, but I don't think it's like insanely tamer. It's probably what, like 50 to 80, probably like 80% stronger at least, isn't it?
So the PS4 Pro doubled compute units and doubled ROPs and added FP16. Its bandwidth increase wasn't as drastic. I don't remember what the bandwidth increase was. I mean, I want to say it was like a 30% bandwidth increase. So actually, bandwidth increase is in line with what we're seeing here. They also added a dedicated checkerboarding upscaling chip. So there was a lot that went into that PS4 Pro. All right, though. Having said all of that, we still don't know for sure. To me, it seems a little tamer, kind of, is how I would put it. But we still don't know if there's something going on with like a bespoke upscaling, like FSR 3.5 chip thing in there. I can't confirm anything about that personally, so I'm just staying away from talking about it. But it's not, I was talking to people in the Moore's Laws at Discord, and again, everyone, speculation warning right here. I'm not saying this is a PS5 Pro, but like, one thing I would suggest is we don't really know if there's some special acceleration going on with upscaling that could be even inside of the graphics unit itself. I mean, right now, to my memory, the PS5 is almost a 37 compute unit device because they took the basis of a compute unit and modified it into like an audio FPGA or something. So for surround sound calculations and stuff, they even said we could probably use this to calculate all types of things, but we're going to be using it for audio. Who's to say there's not another custom CU to accelerate upscaling or like some matrix hardware thing? They're like, I don't know. It sounds
the first thing that it sounds like could possibly come from RDNA 4 to RDNA 3 in the PS5 Pro is like adding the matrix shit for AI. And if they had that, then yeah, they could potentially have a FSR 4-ish version on the 4-ish version of FSR on the PS5 Pro,
and some other thing inside of there accelerating it further. I don't know. You know, what I think would be, and so what I'm saying is, we still don't know enough about what else could be going on with this console for me to really double down on if it's less or more. To me, I think it seems a little tamer than the PS4 Pros, but it also seems easier to implement. Like, it seems like Sony is legitimately aiming here to have some games not even need a patch, like unlocked games where you can play in like minimum 40 VRR, or like, you know, God of War Ragnarok, I think runs like 80 frames a second, basically in 1440p. Yeah. With this, now it's just locked to 120. If you did an unlocked 4K mode, I know some games like The Last of Us, I don't even know if you need a patch. I don't remember what the upper frame rate limit if it's 60, but like there's some games where you could see pretty massive, drastic increases in performance without a patch. And the patch may be as simple as a checkbox and they're done. Like what I think is particularly interesting to think about with the PS5 Pro is already in the PlayStation 5's menus, they have these options where they're like force variable frame rates. Force. You can force using FreeSync, and you can tell it by default to use higher frame rates. Like what I'm getting at, Dan, is what if there is some bespoke upscaling method here that is like basically competitive with DLSS in combination with all of these built-in features in the menus? And if you like, what if Sony can force higher unlocked frame rates, force and all of this without even being patched because they already have these flags inside the PS5 menu to force it if they want to, and they can just say it's an experimental mode. And if a dev wants to, they can program to the middle, make use of the newer RDNA architecture features that are coming with this, and maybe double performance. But what if they can give you a 50% or more boost literally without the devs touching the game, which I think I've heard Sony was really annoyed. For example, the Bloodborne still runs at 30 frames per second in 1080p. What if Sony can, in the OS, force it to run at 4K 60 now?
Something that would be really cool.
That is what they're aiming to do. And so then it becomes, is this a tamer? Or I mean, on paper, it's a tamer upgrade, but it might be more impactful.
Yeah, I could see that being the case. And it's mostly going to be just a quality of life update more so than a full revolution. And the one other thought I have is I hope this stays at $500 and doesn't go to $600.
Compressed Earthblocks writes in, and he says, Tom talked about various ways Sony could have done a PS5 Pro, and it seems like they went with more cost-effective version that just basically gets some settings but higher performance, same settings with higher performance, unless specifically trying to take advantage of it. Do you guys think this will slot in at current PlayStation 5 pricing and current PS5 will go down in price? I actually put a lot of thought into this, and I asked some people about this. I didn't ask anyone at Sony who would make this, didn't talk to anyone at Sony about this, but I talked to people who know people there and could give an informed opinion. And no one has shot down this idea by me. So number one, I don't think Sony's made the decision yet. I think, and we'll get into this soon, but like there could be a lot of Xbox announcements in the next couple months that changes how Sony decides to position the PS5 Pro. So I think Sony's waiting to see how the dust settles a bit more, waiting to see how their sales continue over the summer, and then they will make a final decision. But from what I am seeing here, I mean, still just 16 gigabytes of RAM, not even 20 gigabit per second, so they can go for the cheapest. RAM costs probably lower than not lower than last year, but RAM costs that are lower than when they launched the PS5 is what we're talking about. Meanwhile, I don't see why the motherboard would be that much more expensive. Power delivery should be about the same. If they're, since they're using 4 nanometer, and they're not going for something crazy like 72 or more compute units, like they're not disabling 80 to 76 here. So this die isn't going to be gigantic. Like, I'm not seeing anything in this console that really makes the price to make it late this year more than the price to make a PS5 back in 2020. Not drastically more. Maybe a little more, but not drastically more. And so an idea that I'm throwing around in my head is they are selling a disk drive separately right now. Right. I think there's a chance that they're considering launching the PlayStation 5 Pro for $499 with no disk drive. And then if you want to get a disk drive, that bumps it up to like $550 to $600, depending on, if it ever goes down in price or whatever. But so that is my suspicion, is that Sony doesn't know yet. And that I feel like that's the move they want to make, is $500 again, no disk drive. And then they'll drop the price of the Slim to $400 if they think they need to. And again, but it doesn't come with a disk drive. So it's not a huge price drop, really. And they're just waiting to make that decision.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I could see that being the case. That makes sense to me. I mean, I guess adding some level of modularity allows you to mix and match the parts you want more. It's a little bit annoying, but I don't think they're going insane with it like has happened in the past with consoles. So I don't think it's a huge deal.
No, and I think they would even make the argument like, let's say you bought a PlayStation 5 Slim now, and then you want to buy a PlayStation 5 Pro later, they could say, yeah, you could keep one in the bedroom, one here, you get one disk drive. Yeah, you saved money on both. You can bring it room to room for the 2 games that are on disk. That's an argument they could make.
Yeah.
All Jessie wants this Valentine's season is for Maurice to play with her more often. But unfortunately, he just does not give out playtime or kisses for as low of a rate as she does. And I think she's just going to have to deal with that. But do you know what you don't have to deal with? Paying too much for Microsoft software if you go to cdkeyoffer.com. This piece of content is sponsored by cdkeyoffer.com. Whether it's Microsoft operating systems, Office products, or even many of the latest games, cdkeyoffer.com provides PC gamers with a product this community deserves. Amongst endlessly elevating component costs, fair pricing on Microsoft keys is one thing that we at least should get, I think. And the Moore's Law is Dead team has been working with cdkeyoffer.com for a very long time. And that's because they're good to me, good to Dan, good to about a dozen family members of friends of mine that have used their services. And they've been really, really good, most importantly, to the Moore's Law is Dead community. So support this channel by using offer code BrokenSilicon to save 25% off Microsoft software, or you can also use Die Shrink to save 3% off everything else on the website like games. Using either of those codes really helps the channel a ton, and it helps save you money. So use those codes BrokenSilicon and Die Shrink at cdkeyoffer.com today. All right, well, let's keep the PlayStation train going this episode, as that seems to be a ton of the news over the past couple of weeks. With story number 4, PlayStation Handheld in development. All right, let's cover this too right now. From the PlayStation Leak this channel dropped a couple of weeks ago, there was also the bombshell revelation that Sony is working on an AMD-powered PlayStation Handheld. While details are scarce, I will say the following. The fact that it uses AMD IP, which is something I confirmed, telegraphs that I think Sony definitely wants to support native PS4 games in the PlayStation Handheld at a minimum. And they may even be planning some sort of PlayStation 6S handheld for launch many years from now. That is really the two directions I see this going. Either Sony is working to make something that can run, this is the way I would put it, like a nerfed version of the PS5, but same architecture, but it has enough compute units and hardware in there to natively run all PS4 games in base PS4 mode, or any game that gets a PS5 Pro patch. Also, Sony is preparing devs. We want the PS5 Pro patch to come with something that is basically a half PlayStation 5 Pro. So if you put in the effort to tweak settings, check this other box that cuts the resolution down in a third or something. That would be something that comes in a few years. Or I do think there's a decent chance they're working for the PlayStation 6 to have a handheld variant that will run all previous gen games and then run PlayStation 6 games at significantly lower settings, but be able to run them. And all of this is to say, though, this is certainly not launching anytime soon as well. It is in full design, but it's still high-level design. I shouldn't say full design. It's in high-level design at AMD right now, meaning they are putting out the general concepts, pricing, and what they could generally be sure they would do in the next few years. Now, money has exchanged hands, though. So Sony has paid for this work. This isn't them having one phone call. like a good example of the opposite of this would be the amount of times, I think this channel was the first to leak this, that NVIDIA's had phone calls with Pat Gelsinger, like if I ever wanted to make graphics cards on an Intel fab node, would that be an issue? And he'd said, no, this isn't a phone call. They paid AMD to start working on a handheld. So it's a serious project, but also confirmed in that video was that the Xbox Series Elite, that was a thing that was canceled in development after where the handheld is now. So just because it's serious, just because money's exchanged hands, that does not mean it still couldn't be canceled. The Xbox Series Elite was at a minimum. So I don't know. In this writer's opinion, it would make sense if Sony did this, though, because they could use some extra method to get back market share in Japan, where they basically are allergic to consoles that aren't handhelds. This would be a great option for that. And additionally, Sony would be looking around right now and going, well, the Steam Deck is a huge success. Vita 2 didn't make sense. It would have had its own library again. There was no way to make it compatible with the cell processor in the PS3. I mean, there were just a dozen reasons why making a second Vita didn't make sense. But right now, after the success of the Steam Deck, and also after the success of the Steam Deck has been making Steam sales increase, which are all digital sales, which which is something I'm sure Sony's also noticing. I like the idea of this happening now and can explain why it wouldn't have happened in the past. And so I think it is likely to happen. But yeah, that's basically it, Dan. What did you think of this? It's a pretty big get for the channel, I think.
Oh, I mean, yeah, the existence of a handheld, Sony trying to get back into handheld is cool. I mean, even with the going back all the way back to the PSP, which was far, far more successful than the PS Vita, there was always a problem with their handhelds where they were trying to divide their library into two consoles. And because the home console is the bigger thing, it always went to the home console. So it was like kind of a big event when like a full AAA game really went to like even the PSP. Because like I remember like Metal Gear Solid Peace Walker coming to it, and while the way the game is designed is definitely limited by the fact that it's on a PSP, it was still in my mind a full Metal Gear Solid game. And that just didn't happen as often. So having them share libraries is ideal, and then you choose which form factor you want. Do you want to be a mobile person? Do you want to be a home console person? Or do you want to really shell out and buy both? It would be great if this were to come out as like a PS6 mobile. If instead it would be cool possibly if it was instead a Switch like the design where you dock it and it becomes stronger, but that sounds not possible to me, or that sounds like that's definitely not what they're doing. But I wish.
Yeah, I mean, like they could almost. Still. I would, at a minimum, I would recommend that what Sony does is they make sure it has an HDMI out, so that sure the PlayStation 6 can play your games at whatever 4K ray tracing or something, but the PlayStation 6 handheld, maybe it's just 1080p and they have to turn down more settings or something. But at a minimum, 1080p, that's still enough to plug it into a TV and it'd be fun as like even just a portable. I mean, who knows? Maybe they could take the worst yields of it and make it run at that PlayStation TV, PlayStation View thing they did, just like the bad yields that require more voltage. They just sell like a tiny box thing. Like there's a lot of reasons for them to do this, and it honestly makes just a ton of sense in my perspective.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of really what else there would be to say about this. I don't know. The one thing I would say is I'm starting to wonder, like, not me, you, I've talked with Colin Moriarty. I've heard them talk about it on Sacred Symbols. I'm wondering if we're being a little too pessimistic about what's achievable in a few years if they really set their minds to it. Because something occurs to me. Like, let me see here. Let me see. PS5 6 nanometer die size. Like, it is. Yeah, I think the current PlayStation 5 Slim uses a 6 nanometer die that's 260 millimeters squared. And if we look up Rembrandt die size, we get to 208 millimeters squared. There's something I'm wondering. Like, what I'm like, I don't know the PlayStation 6 node yet, or at least if I do, I forgot it. But let's say it was 3 nanometer or something like that. And if it was 2, double apply everything I'm talking about. But like that. This is still kind of in portable APU range, and we've seen Rembrandt APUs hit 15 watts. They're not clocked as fast, but there's seriously, I mean this, a part of me that's starting to wonder, like, is there a chance Sony's just planning to use 3 or even 2 nanometer in like 2027 or some 2028, and then they'll just give the best yields to the home console version, and they could just try to keep the die, which they would want to, because this silicon's to be ultra expensive in the future. Probably 3 nanometer, because 2 nanometer will be too in demand actually with expensive products. So let's say they take a 3 nanometer APU and they make it at 220 millimeters squared, or somewhere between 200 and 220. Best yields go to console. And we've seen Rembrandt hit 15 watts. So why can't they take a 3 nanometer APU, disable it by a fourth, or cut, like, and just say, instead of always disabling some of the compute units, why don't we share yields and just clock it lower, like low enough that it can still natively run PlayStation 5 and PlayStation 5 Pro games. That's all we would need to achieve. And I'm wondering if we're thinking too small that that's impossible.
I mean, I could see that being a possibility. And if it could, more or less run PS5 games like a PS5, just maybe slightly worse frame rates or slightly lower resolution, that would be awesome. I think the way that APUs have progressed over the course of the past several years, that doesn't really seem out of the question anymore.
Yeah, so I don't know. It's just something I think about. Like if they're going to use 3 nanometer, they're going to want to probably have a die that's smaller than the PS5s. If it's a die smaller than the PS5s, which is currently only 260 millimeters squared, we're already in laptop APU range. If we're already in a laptop APU range, why wouldn't Sony tell AMD to design it so that it could have one version? All it needs to do is have the cut down variant that captures basically all the yields be a variant that can at least, while clocked lower, run at 2.2 gigahertz. Like if you have a 200 watt console that has, I don't know, like 108 to 128 compute units enabled for the PlayStation 6. I haven't heard that. I'm just saying. Let's say that's what it is. Why would not something with a fourth of the die disabled, clocked from 3 gigahertz all the way down to 2.2 gigahertz, not be able to possibly get into at least a Steam Deck form factor? That'd be way cheaper than designing 2 separate dies. And I've heard people recently talking to people at Xbox, we'll get to this in a second, talk about how having 2 dies for the Series S and Series X makes sense on paper, but in all honesty, like it costs a lot of money to design both of them. You maybe should have just designed one and disabled it or something. Like, unless you're going, I'm starting to think that's probably what Sony would do. Probably
that would be more efficient. I mean, because they're not an outright hardware silicon company, so putting all that effort into something that you have to outsource is quite a task. And
custom here's the best part, right? I mean, if it doesn't sell well, they don't care. They didn't have to design 2 APUs. It won't be a failure.
No, yeah, that's true. Maybe that could be what they're doing.
And again, if this rumor were to have come out 2 years ago, I would go, oh, a portable PS4 that can sometimes run PS5 games if it was patched for it. Makes a lot of sense to come out in 2024. But if it's at least 2 years away, and I think it's at least 3, why would you launch a mobile PS4 right before or during a new generation? Even if it has to come out after the initial launch a handheld for the PlayStation 6 that will last for decades.
Yeah.
Like without a redesign. And the more I think about it, the more I'm like, that's kind of actually what I suspect they're considering. Although again, they're working with AMD on design work, so I don't know if this is like they're asking if it should be its own thing. It's in high level, but if I was Sony, that's the conclusion I'd be more driving for. But again, this is someone who knows not what the specs are. So I don't know if that's bonkers to suggest. They would, like, if there's some tech in the PlayStation 6 that uses too much energy, requires too much space, I don't know. But I just think that's a hypothetical scenario no one's talking about that. It's worth thinking about. That might actually make the most sense economically. All right. Now, let us then move on to story. Let me pull up the lights here to shift them to story number 5. All right. Behind the scenes, Xbox was reluctant to launch another generation. All right. Here's the write-up. To say there has been consternation about the future of Xbox over the past week would be putting it lightly. We've seen this channel leak that Xbox seemed uncertain about next gen and the last loose ends. Tons of other rumors that I really haven't paid attention to have been saying tons of negative things. I don't know which ones are true. So, but there's been a lot of debate and consternation about Xbox recently. And I've even leaked that they've been considering bids from Intel and probably Nvidia to build the next console, meaning they hadn't even signed a contract with AMD yet, whereas Sony's been designing the PlayStation 6 with AMD in concert for over a year now. Meanwhile, there's even been rumors recently that Xbox may announce some seismic change to the Xbox business model in the coming week, which actually, that reminds me, everybody, this is going to possibly come out during some Phil Spencer press conference where they announce something big about Xbox. So I'm about to put out a leak right now that's new information of what I've heard from people inside Xbox, but take this as a behind the scenes peek behind the curtain. I have to remind everybody that in the last loose ends that I did, I said, despite Intel bidding for the next Xbox, and I believe other people, including Nvidia, did as well, by the way, that it sounded like they probably didn't get it. They probably went back to AMD, and there's probably going to be another Xbox generation. Big takeaway being just how hard Intel went for it is crazy. And the fact that Microsoft took this long to sign a deal sounds crazy to me as well. I did not confirm there will not be another Xbox or that they won't go back to AMD. And maybe we'll record some addendum about some insane announcement Phil Spencer makes. But for now, I think whatever I'm about to say, again, it's a peek behind the curtain. I don't think it actually changes whether or not Microsoft announces some Xbox thing or not, because, and I think I'll try to put this on screen, I've seen people claim they're about to kill Xbox, and I've seen people claim in Microsoft that Phil Spencer just told them they're not going to do it. So this leak is not me saying whether they would or wouldn't. It's just me telling you some crazy stuff I've heard that I think is just interesting to talk about. So if I put these quotes on screen here, someone from Intel tells me, dude, Microsoft just fucked us. I guess now we know that their letters of intent mean absolutely nothing. I have no idea if AMD got the contract back, but this has left a bad taste in my mouth. And for what I hear, we aren't the only company annoyed by the games they've been playing lately, basically inferring that Microsoft had been really pushing multiple companies to bid against AMD to try to get better pricing on another Xbox, and that they kind of made it look like they were going to go with someone besides AMD. Again, I don't think all final decisions, at least I can't independently confirm all final decisions have been made yet, but at least the games Microsoft has been playing have made people very annoyed, especially at Intel. Now, a second source here, someone at Microsoft says, I honestly have no idea what's going on with management anymore. We are at least a year behind Sony in SoC development by now. And I've had multiple people confirm this, by the way. And it seems like upper management's seen some metric that's making them doubt our ability to compete for another generation. And a final source here says, I do by now believe we are going to launch another generation of Xbox, but the fact that there was this level of uncertainty is very telling. Oh, and by the way, the earliest we can do a proper next-gen launch will be 2027. Anything before that is either going to be a new kind of Xbox, which I did see rumors pop up. No idea if there's any truth to them. I didn't even read the headline past the headlines that they're considering a handheld Xbox now, too. I don't know if this is piggybacking off of this channel's leaks, the hype of Xbox people. This happens all the time. But he says, just to be clear, they're a year behind Sony in designing the next Xbox with AMD, if they even are continuing. And they think any launch before 2027 would be the most rushed, haphazardly thrown together basic specs you've ever seen, like in the past few generations, or it's some new change to Xbox. So I don't know, Dan. This is, again, not easily a big headline of anything I'm saying here, but I think it's interesting. What do you think of it?
Yeah, I mean, to me, it makes sense that they would that they'd consider axing Xbox as a piece of hardware, or because the platform that they're trying to create is Game Pass, and the Xbox device is just a vector to sell you Game Pass at this point, and it's the lowest cost way to get Game Pass. So if it's not selling well, I don't quite see why they are doing. So why they're putting so much work into making them still. That being said, I don't understand how Microsoft thinks they have the leverage with all the people they partner with to be able to do this, because once again, they're not selling that well. Maybe Sony has the leverage to screw over some people by signing.
Well, let's be clear. Microsoft's a $1 trillion company, and I think, at least in regards to Intel, they want to keep selling. I mean, if Intel and Microsoft's relationship truly soured, that's worse for Intel, I think.
Yeah, that's true, I suppose. I guess they do just have to humor their the Xbox division, because they're such big partners in PC. But I don't know. It's just bizarre that they're conducting themselves that way with Intel and Nvidia, and AMD, and they just happen to have gone with AMD 2 times in a row.
And to be clear here, again, or I guess not again, but what I heard is this wasn't like it was like a non-binding letter of intent, which when I worked in the automotive industry, I guess that was a thing that happened a couple times. Usually you'd want to sign, we intend to do this. But if there wasn't some legal recourse clause, it's really non-binding. We're saying we intend to, and if we decide not to, sorry, double bird. So to be clear, it's not like they went back and they owe Intel money, or they're like going to have a lawsuit over it. But they at least said something like, we intend to go with you at this point. So if that happened and then fell through, I don't know, but I will say I was talking to some of my contacts about this behind the scenes, and they pointed me to the fact, and I didn't know this, or should I say, I didn't remember this happening. Wasn't aware of it at the time. But I guess the original Xbox dev kits, and I mean OG Xbox, the one that competed with the PS2, apparently that had AMD hardware in it and the dev kits, and then they went on stage and announced an Intel Nvidia partnership. Well, AMD engineers were in the front row. So this is something they've done before, and if not done worse than this before. So It isn't the craziest thing to suggest that they were considering this again.
Yeah, I know. It's just weird that they're continuing to do this to me, but I guess, I mean, it's just, I don't see why people would want to work with Microsoft, and it kind of just sounds like they do, and they could do that in the past because it made them a lot of money, like with the 360, but that's just not there these days when it comes to the Xbox hardware itself. Sure, they make a lot of money partnering with Xbox on PC, and I think that would mean all of these companies probably just wish that they would be putting all their stuff on PC instead.
Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, I guess I don't know that I have really that much else to say about this, except that this is some of the craziest quotes I've ever heard, and I never expected this much interesting console intrigue to be reported on in the first half of this year. That's so funny. A year ago, we would have been like, surely we'll be talking about the upcoming Zen 5 launch and Strix, and but now it's like we're just talking about these incredible console leaks that are coming out right now that are far more interesting, I think, to talk about versus other stuff that just all seems to be delayed. But again, I'll round out the story by saying this. Notice, I did not just say here that there won't be another Xbox. And all I'm saying is the people who work in the Xbox division are telling me if they're confused about what's going on, at least as of the past, like a couple days ago from when I talked to them, and that whatever happens, management made some decision up here and did not tell engineering down here. And so if they announced a release date this week, just know that this was going on in the background. And I think it will add more context. We'll probably have to talk about it again. Who knows? Maybe we'll do some last minute recording before we drop this episode or something. But just remember, only take away from this what I said. Don't add other stuff on top of it, depending on what gets announced. This is one of those awkward times where we have to talk about something interesting before more interesting news might break. And what else was I going to say? And then just remember, this was recorded Sunday. All right. Let us now move on to the final story of this episode, which I threw to you to look at. So one thing I just did not have time to look at this week was the fact that the Apple Vision Pro came out. So Dan, I've heard mixed things, as I always do, depending on who you're talking to about it. What is the Apple Vision Pro? What, how are the reviews looking?
So to me, it almost feels like it's a beta test for something that will possibly be good down the road. And I just looked at 3 perspectives of it, of people that used it. I have I would recommend anybody watch like the Marquez Brownlee video on it. I think he does a pretty good job highlighting the positives of it. It's clearly using a lot of cool tech, and the pseudo augmented reality thing they do seems to work pretty well. Like people, and I'm sure you've seen videos online now of people walking around with the them on, and it seems to actually work well. Some people have been given access to them for a day and to use them for work, and some people say it's incredibly useful for productivity tasks because you can have a bunch of displays open. It also sounds like it could be really easy to distract yourself with, because somebody, one of the articles I read on it was a person saying that they had a group chat open, something playing on Netflix, and their work task all on at the same time. So it sounds like it might just, if you have a tendency to distract yourself while at work, it might just really drive that.
Well, I have ADHD. This would probably be a bad choice for me then for now.
And most people seem to say that when you spend a long time in it, you get tired really fast while using it, though. So I think that's notable.
Do you think it's because your eyes are just doing so much more work than they're used to?
Yeah, like the person that of the article I linked said, she was able to work really efficiently on it for 4 hours, and then she had to take a nap.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other thing to note about it is because Apple is really cagey about their designs for everything for some reason, I included a teardown, and it uses a Zeiss pancake lens, and it's the highest level, highest resolution I think I've heard of per eye monitor. And it's each eye is higher than 4K with 11 million pixels, or I should say 11 million usable pixels, because the actual display itself is like 12 million, and the lens loses it. I did think an interesting thing they pointed out, though, was when you measure the meaningful resolution, because the way the lens works is you get lower and lower pixel density as you go further and further out from the center, because it focuses on the center of the screen. You actually have really, really low resolution in the periphery of the virtual environment, and only the center of the environment is actually that high resolution. And there's a problem where you can directly interface like your MacBook with it, and it will add your MacBook to the virtual environment. And he said that kind of sucks, because you're taking a display that's like 4 or 5K and then lowering the resolution in the simulated environment you're in. So if you're actually trying to use a computer, it's probably just better to take that off and use the computer without the Vision Pro. So all of this to me says that there's a vision of the future where this could be cool once certain aspects of it are improved. But the basis of the tech is all very interesting to me, because I think the most impressive thing is the way they're able to integrate augmented and virtual reality pretty seamlessly.
And do it in a way that doesn't give you a headache or look ridiculous.
But on the other end, there's the dystopian aspect of that, where you're giving Apple $3,500 for them to completely control what your reality looks like while you're wearing it.
What is it? It reminds me of a Tim Dillon comedian had a bit where he's like, what did he say? Get in the pod. Hey, shut up. Shut up, you poor people. You're not getting a new house. No house for you. Put on the goggles and get in the pod. That's what the billionaires are saying. Well, it's like, that's the thing you're worried about.
Like, imagine a reality where people, I don't think this is going to get wide adoption anytime soon, if ever, because I don't think most people want to walk around and stare at people wearing snorkeling goggles wherever.
I'm looking at some pictures of it too. The eyes do look goofy on that screen.
Yes. Oh, the eyes look hilarious. But like, imagine if they integrated tech that anytime it sees like a billboard, instead of it showing you what's actually on the billboard, it shows you like an ad for some Apple-owned product. Like, every billboard in New York suddenly becomes an ad for Killers of the Flower Moon.
Yeah, well, I mean, that is definitely what these people want to do. They're going to do that in video games. They're already doing that in video games, actually, to a certain degree. But for sure, long term, what they would love to do is go, oh, this person likes these things. We're going to put that on the billboard instead.
Yeah. So that's the dystopian fear I have that this could turn into. But the tech's cool.
Yeah. I guess the one question I would ask you, like what your opinion is on this. My memory is, I don't remember if it was half a year ago or a full year ago. Like it was probably half a year ago-ish, where like it was initially announced and actually they confirmed the specs. And my memory was we were impressed by the specs. We thought it was incredibly expensive, but with further discussions, especially the one with, sadly, it's Bradley, where he like went through all of it, and it's like, oh no, this thing really does cost like not as much as they're charging, but thousands of dollars to make. This thing is not cheap. And we went, okay, well, so it seems like the approach they are taking is everything we think they might want for this to go mainstream, it's gonna do it well. We're not taking the approach of dumbing down things and guessing what people want and then trying to make it $500. We're gonna make it $3,500, and it will be future proofed, and then we'll see how people like it, and then we'll find ways to reduce the cost to what will be purchasable long term, so that there's at least the best, if you will, mass produced dev kit possible, so that we can take the most data to make the best device in 10 years from now or something.
Yeah.
That's what we expected, and we thought it looked impressive. Does it seem like it is successfully doing that to you, or do you think it still is maybe missing the mark on some things?
I mean, I think it's accomplishing its task, and I think initial reviews for the first version of this they put out were inevitably going to be lukewarm, because it seems like you look at it and it's like, this is almost useful but not quite.
Mm-hmm.
And so the only people that I think are really going to buy this are people that are super into Apple, or people that just buy every expensive new gadget that they can afford.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I'm trying to think if there's really anything else to say about this product here. I mean, it's a beta. We thought it would be a beta product. It does seem to be a beta product. I would say it seems to impress people. Tell me if I'm characterizing this wrong. It seems to impress people more than any haters would have expected. Like stuff that sounded science fiction, it can do it. Having said that, it's actually, tell me if this is the wrong way to characterize it. It's not even so much that it isn't doing the things they said it would do and doing them better than anyone expected them to accomplish. It's just that once they've accomplished those things, there are new problems that have popped up that we didn't know would be problems.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. And I don't know. The other thing is, I see the tech there. I say, a lot of that tech is kind of cool, but I don't know what iteration on it would make me want to buy it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So it seems like, because it will probably need another iteration to solve these problems that weren't problems that they could have solved by spending more money. It's just things we did not know would be problems. It's still probably another beta generation away from being, and then they'll try to make the perfect one. So this really is maybe 10 years away, though. It's not to say VR, I mean, one could argue VR is already partially mainstream. It's just like, to get to the mainstream that some people mean when they say mainstream, we're still generations, not one gen away.
Yeah, because for me, just for me as a product, if I'm going to wear something some AR device, I think I would want the AR device to only take up a portion of my field of vision, like the Google Glass, except better than what Google Glass was, obviously. Because I don't want my entire perception to be taken over by a heavy pair of VR goggles.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, I think that's all I have left to say about this one, if you do.
I agree.
All right. Well, let us now move on. It's a rather short wrap up. These are, of course, the stories that we believe deserve to mention, but didn't really deserve its own 10 to 20 minute conversation. All right. So you sent me this one. What is this report about? I mean, we've all heard of this. I don't think I've had to deal with it yet, but like, of low quality USB and even like illegally made, misleading USB sticks.
So I'm sure at conferences, everybody's been to like a business conference before, and they give you a crappy USB thing as like their little swag bag.
Yes.
So there's been a problem with those USBs using bad NAND chips flash storage for a while. They put partially disabled chips into those, so they wear out quickly and they don't store as much as they claim to. And now there's this firm that analyzes tech is starting to find them coming up in actually like branded USB drives that you would buy at a Best Buy. And for some reason,
so they're sneaking the thing that isn't what you're buying into the box. Jeez.
So, and they annoyingly don't say which brands they found in the report were problematic that they found in the report for some reason. But, you know, I would just say watch out. Make sure you're not skimping on flash drives when you buy one if you care about what's being stored on it.
Yeah, I would have to assume, because I don't know where I have one here that I just use for like quick backups when I'm on I have a PNY 1 terabyte, and I also have some Kingston USB drives. I'd assume, that or Samsung from Amazon, there would be some degree of quality control to let that happen. Unless, of course, we've also seen people on Amazon take Zen or Intel CPUs, delid them, and then just put a different heat spreader on. Like, so there's all types of scams even on Amazon, I guess. But you'd hope they'd have some level of quality control, and we would just hope this. It seems to run fine for me. This 1 terabyte PNY USB drive I have, but
yeah, I hope
you're saying it's probably more of the cheaper no name ones, but you don't know for sure because they won't say names.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I would be surprised if a company as professional as like PNY, I would be surprised if they were finding their way into those, but you never know, I guess.
You know, I will say it is a standard like this big flash drive right there. That's 1 terabyte. It feels so heavy. It is clearly actually packed with the memory. I guess that's something to watch out for if you buy 1 terabyte USB. Does it feel as light as your 1 gigabyte? Maybe it is for a reason.
Yeah.
All right. Also, I saw this pop up, I believe, today before we started recording. Yeah, apparently there's rumors that Microsoft may be working on their own super resolution option that can inject itself into games in a later version of Windows. And it's popping up in beta here. It doesn't do anything, but it's in the menu.
I mean, that's kind of interesting. If you can make menus and everything look sharper, I'm all for it.
Yeah, but it's for like games, though.
Yeah, I know, but I think I read it will be for other apps as well, too.
Oh. Yeah, I don't know. I guess that's interesting. We really can't report anything about it until there's more details. Also, I saw that there was a Hawkpoint first look here. And frankly, though, I did not see anything that I could quantify that easily. At a minimum, like, let me see. Like, there is some benchmarks here, and it does seem to sometimes do a bit better, but I don't know. This isn't the comprehensive Hawkpoint test I would want to see. I think at a minimum what this tells you is, and they said it was launching in February, over the next week, you're going to start seeing a litany of Hawkpoint reviews starting to come out here. I won't say who. I know at least one tech tuber who has a Hawkpoint product right now and is testing it. So expect that all to come very soon. But yeah, I mean, it's a pretty tame uplift like we would have expected is what I'm hearing so far. Additionally, Dan, you sent this to me. Should we talk about this? I guess I forgot to talk about it or to bring it up. There is the RTX 3050 6 gigabyte, which I believe has literally launched. I believe because I don't even pay enough attention to really say so, but I think it's like 170. Dan, what do you think of the 3050 6 gigabyte?
It's exists, I guess, and it's not the most expensive card on the internet that you can get. So if you're really looking for entry level, I guess it's there. But also remember, it has a lot fewer CUDA cores and is clocked a lot slower than the real 3050. So it's not really a 3050, but
no, it's probably a solid 10 to 25% weaker than a standard 3050.
It might be 30% weaker. It's like 300 megahertz lower clock. I think 300 fewer CUDA cores. And if they're using 6 gigabytes, only 6 gigabytes, that means
96 bit.
Yeah, it's 25% lower bandwidth too.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and it's funny. I was talking to someone at Nvidia. This person asked me, "I'm just curious what you think about this card." And the person assumed I was going to say terrible things, and I said, "No, I mean, look, if at 170, that's the MSRP, right? Am I missing this?
It's I thought it was 180, but let me make sure I'm not misremembering.
RTX. I just want to make sure, and again, this tells you how. No, it's 170. I'm seeing 170.
Okay.
There are some that are 180, but I believe it starts at 170. Yeah, I mean, look, you can make fun of it easily. I am someone that is willing to look at a product for what it competes with. And at the end of the day, technically at 170, this product can compete with like discounted like 1650s and 1630s are barely cheaper. So from that perspective, it's like, yeah, it sucks, but it's in a sucky realm. It's like the 6500 XT. Everyone hated on the 6500 XT 4 gigabyte, but like it was $100 less than the 1650 and it was way better. So, I can try to make that argument for that a little bit. The problem is I can still find it really would have to be below 150. Even then, to be clear, my advice, guys, save up for a 6600 or 3060 12 gigabyte. Like save up $100 and get a 3060 with double the RAM. and
I guess
wildly more performance.
I guess what I would say is at the same price, this might be better. I think this is better than a
500 XT.
I think it is, but
of course it is. It has 6 gigs instead of 4 gigabytes. And that. But here's the problem I have: this isn't always true. But every other day, half of the days when I check, there's a 6500 XT 8 gigabyte in stock for less money. And remember, the 3050 is stronger than the 6500 XT, but it wasn't like wildly stronger. We're talking about, if you don't run out of RAM, which you usually will be with these cards, we're talking about, like, I don't know what you would say, probably 590 performance versus 1070 performance is the difference between a 3050 and that. So but this is cut down. So this is probably pretty close to a 6500 XT. Any 6500 XT 8 gigabyte, and I've seen several for below 160, better choice. It has 8 gigabytes. Games are going to be built for 8 gigabytes. I tested a 6500 XT 8 gigabyte. It ran a lot faster, actually, than the base one, and it did not choke because of its bus width. Guys, enough RAM is enough RAM, or it isn't. It is not choking. It's not too weak to use 8 gigabytes. That's ridiculous. So I can't recommend the 3050 unless, honestly, it's competing with a 6400. It needs to be like 130 because it doesn't have 8 gigabytes. And again, keep in mind, this isn't me saying I recommend the 6500 XT 8 gigabyte. It's just the fact that I can find a better option in the price range means it's still stupid then. I mean, I don't think you should buy any of these cards. And I think the 3050, and I've heard this might happen, though, I will say that, should drift below 150 eventually. If it got to like $100,
sure,
that is where it needs to be for it to make sense. And it's not me, again, it's not me saying this isn't an improvement over the 1650, 6500 XT 4 gigabyte. Of course it is. I'm just saying it would have to be that cheap. And even then, sometimes you can find 5500 XT 8 gigabytes for sale.
Yeah, those exist
for $100. They can't do the ray tracing, but so really $100 is where it's interesting. It's not a matter of me hating. It's not a matter of me ignoring the fact that honestly it might be breaking even around $100, but it is me saying it doesn't matter. That is what it would have to be for me to think it's that interesting. I'm not being a hater. I'm just being honest. And all of these cards that made sense during shortages, basically they don't anymore. All right, and the final thing here, which actually made a decent amount of news, is the CableMod angled adapter was finally recalled. I didn't cover this on this channel all that much, Dan, but I will tell you what, I had a lot of people telling me in retail, this thing's going to get recalled. This thing, first thing we do if there is a broken 4090 is ask if they have this CableMod adapter.
And it's really funny. If you browse the Nvidia subreddit ever, a lot of the posts are about people's 4090s burning because of CableMod adapters. And there's two guys on the forum that work for CableMod that are always there really quickly to offer you a refund and pay for your 4090. So I guess they handled it somewhat, but I don't know how this didn't get recalled sooner.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's something I've known about for, God, I think maybe a year, over half a year. I remember some of my contacts saying, by the way, this thing sucks. It's going to get recalled. And I'm kind of shocked it didn't happen sooner. So, all right, let us now move on to the final reader mails here. Oh, one of them comes from QH Freddy, who says, why did Nvidia try to reinvent the GPU power connector when the 8-pin EPS connector specification already exists? Now, this was written here by Carbon Cry, who was able to help out. He got sick this weekend, so he wasn't able to help as much as usual, but he did write this response. He says, EPS 8 is rated for 225 watts and has 4 12-volt pins for comparison. PCIe 8 pins have 3 12-volt pins and 1 50-watt rated supply. Usually, the standard 8 pin is rated for 150 watts each. Meanwhile, 12VH Power has 6 12-volt pins and is rated for a whopping 600 watts. So why not EPS 8? Because it has too high of a safety factor. Do the math. 12VH Power just has a much smaller safety factor and uses smaller wires and pins, meaning that you need to be and I'm just interjecting here for Carbon Cry. Nvidia is making the bet with their 12-pin connectors that manufacturing has gotten high quality enough that if you have a lower safety factor, your people know what they're doing, and so it doesn't matter. And they're trying to make it so you need one connector that's as big or even technically a little smaller than a standard 8-pin forever now that can power any card without any headache, and they want that to become the normal thing. But it does cost a lot more. And the last time I had on Not From Concentrate, who is that, of course, compact PC builder, he talked about the fact that, if it's perfectly made, the 16-12 pin, it's great, but anyone who does cable modding, this thing sucks to try to meet the standards, and the safety factor is small. So this is something I've heard about before. So really, Carbon Cry finishes this by saying, if you want if you want to keep using 8 pins, we need PCI SIG to relax safety factors, which we've even seen AMD sell cards that break them and say, we don't care, we're sure it's going to work. Like the 295, the R9 295X2 is the first one that came to mind, where that thing used around 500 watts usually. And it just used 2 8 pins, meaning each of those 8 pins was at least pulling 250 watts probably. So they can do it. And if we relax the standard, or they came up with a new 8-pin standard for 300 watts, yeah, every mid-range card to low end would just come with one 8-pin, and all high-end cards would probably be fine with just 2 8-pins, and we wouldn't need to use 16-pin. But they haven't relaxed that standard, according to Carbon Cry. At least that's his answer, which I think is interesting. But it is weird, isn't it? I mean, we've literally had cards pulling more power with just 2 8-pins for a very long time.
Oh, well, yeah. That's always how those work, is the standards are, what they're designed to do is always above what they're rated for, which I'm not opposed to. I would rather things be over-engineered than under.
Hilton connectors here, so we can see there's an issue.
Yeah. I'd rather have something be over-engineered than under-engineered, so.
All right, let us move on to another reader mail. Quick Jumper writes in and says, "Hi, Tom. Looking at Q4 AMD earnings, it seems to me that something is wrong. Like, data center is growing, GPUs are holding, but overall, it's not good looking at Nvidia's growth, for example. Do you think AMD is right now evaluating its strategy in various segments? We can maybe see it in GPU, where a big part of the reason for not getting into high-end is just limited resources. Maybe they also have scaling issues. What's your take on the company earnings? Also, with context of Nvidia's big growth and Intel's slow decline." Well, I know a lot of people that are questioning some of Nvidia's earnings, so I'll just leave it at that. I'm not going to say I'm, an analyst betting that sort of a thing and doubling down on that right now, but there are a lot of people raising questions behind the scenes, just so everybody knows about Nvidia's earnings. So let's say that. And I have nothing else to say about Intel's earnings except that they're basically projecting they're going to be de facto flat with zero margins in data center, or I'm sorry to some people, what is it, 2%? Basically zero margins in data center during an AI boom. That is damning. I don't want to kick them while they're down any more than just pointing out something I've pointed out a million times. And AMD just seems solid, but I think, and this might be something I leak in an upcoming video, I do think there's something here. I wouldn't say AMD's grown too fast, but I've definitely heard a lot about how AMD has realized that, number one, they need to stop acting like they're an underdog. And number two, I don't know if it's they bit off more than they could chew. They just didn't chew fast enough. And they need to just hire a lot more people. And they are not happy that they missed a couple of issues with RDNA 3, and that Zen 4 was supposed to come out early 2022. Zen 5 is supposed to come out early this year, if not at the tail end of last year. And they realize they've had multiple product launches now either have issues or come out half a year to a year late. No, these pale in comparison to the issues Intel's dealing with. But they want to beat Intel. They don't want to become Intel. So I think there's a lot going on here where AMD is taking a measured approach and trying to build up sustainably over the next year before they go all out and everything again.
Yeah, and I mean, I think there's just something to be said that there is an AI boom going right now, and Nvidia got to the AI boom first because they're a company that has the resources that can do it. And
they bet on AI, and they made the right bet.
And that's where their growth largely is. It's not because they're outselling AMD in every market, or it's not because they're super outcompeting AMD in every market AMD is competing in.
No. I mean, it's possible for Nvidia to boom in AI, AMD to partially boom in AI and take market share in other places, and that's it. I mean, it doesn't always need to be everyone's winning everything all at once. No News writes in and says, on Broken Silicon 242, you leaked a delay for AMD 800 series motherboards and for Zen 5 CPUs. The talk also hinted at slightly lower than expected performance from Zen 5. Is there an issue with the processor chiplet, the IO die, or getting motherboards to run reliably above DDR5 6400 and then getting PCIe 5 on all of those SoC lanes? The Promontory 21 seems to be the 600 series. So I'm going to just skip ahead here and say you're basically asking, is something wrong with Zen 5? I would just say again, this is going to probably come out in another leak, so I don't want to say too much yet, especially not after I talk to a bunch of people and compare and contrast and come to my final conclusion, because sometimes my opinion changes a little or has an asterisk on it that kind of adds more context. But nobody at AMD is worried about Zen 5 being competitive right now. And just because I'm saying that you should not pay attention to rumors that say Zen 5 will definitely have a well above 30% IPC increase, that doesn't mean I think it's bad.
Yeah, I mean, to me, the picture I have for where Zen 5 is at right now is it's not going to be a bad generation. It might just be a kind of boring one.
Unless they decide to increase core counts or something, which they could if they wanted to. They could go to a 24 core. But yeah, no, I and the memory controller thing, I don't, like, without going into detail, I don't think they have issues with higher memory speeds right now, or if they do, it's not like they have trouble getting above 6400. Like, I don't have any doomsday things to say about Zen 5. There's going to be some specific workloads where Zen 5 is a Zen 4 uplift or higher, but the average, it's just, there's going to be some where it's a little bit lower than what they wanted, but it's going to be another big generation. Mm-hmm. It's just, I don't know that it's bigger than what Zen 4 was anymore. It's just probably comparable to those generations. Again, unless they manage to launch a 8-core X3D plus 16 Zen 5 C core in Q3, if they pulled off something like that, I think people will see this as big as Zen 2. You know, so, all right. Final reader mail. Techno writes in and he says, if you could create a technology company, which industry would it be in? Dan, I'm throwing it to you.
Probably biotech, because that's my area of expertise.
And you probably have a bunch of things you're thinking of, like too many to list, like of types of stuff that people are probably already making startups for. Yeah, I don't know. I will say one thing, and I didn't put any thought into this question before I started recording, so this is what's popping into my head right now on the fly. But one thing that I think we're going to continue to have a big revolution in is portable travel. Like, I think, I don't know if there will be an ad in this episode or the next one, but I've been testing out an e-bike for a sponsor, and it's not insane, but it's definitely something I couldn't have bought for a reasonable price with these capabilities 10 years ago.
Yeah, that's true.
This stuff we're seeing with batteries right now, like, look, every time you see something on Tech Power Up or Tech Spot that's like, this battery's 1,000 times faster, it's coming out in 2 years, that's never fucking happened. So we're not getting 1000x battery performance 2 years from now. But I think it is becoming more and more and more obvious that every 2 years batteries get 10% better on average. Mm-hmm. And that's been happening for decades now. And if you compare batteries, and I've seen some, because I've looked through some of our old airsoft guns, like the old batteries and their capacities and capabilities for the price they had. My gosh, batteries were so bad 20 years ago. And 1.1 times 1.1 times 1.1, it's adding up. And I think we're getting to a point where you could really, with some more modern plastics, metals, and batteries, try to make something this big that goes into your backpack that you unfold and can go like 15, 20 miles an hour. You're seeing that with hoverboards and stuff. But
yeah, that's true.
I think we're getting to a point where I don't like the hoverboards because it just seems like something that's going to turn off and you throw your head into the concrete.
Well, like, that's why one of those was recalled, and the owner of it was trying to get people to buy his product still, because he's refusing to do the recall, because he says a recall for his unsafe product is a violation of his First Amendment rights.
Cool, dude. But yeah, no, I mean, so, I think actually the revolution would be in some sort of, maybe like, and they would work without the battery being charged. Roller skates that are light enough. I think we're still years away from that really happening. But imagine if you could just like pop out these wheels and go for 20 minutes at 10, 20, 15 miles an hour. Like, imagine if there was a scooter so that you have a hand grip so you won't die if the battery runs out, like a hoverboard will. That, honest to God, folds up into something this big and fits into half of your backpack. Doesn't take up the whole backpack. Just folds out and it's actually sturdy. Stuff like that. That's the type of stuff that I think we're going to see much more innovation. Just realizing batteries are so much better now. What are little things we could have done before that aren't gimmicky that actually we just like? That's the type of thing I'd probably be looking at, because that's a thing that doesn't require me to be a, Tony Stark genius with a jet engine to make it work, but is something of like realizing, the technology is where we need it to be to actually do this thing we kind of thought was silly before. That's my answer. All right. Well, that I think is going to do it for this episode. Dan, any final words?
No, I don't think so.
All right. Well, my final words will be, remember to like and subscribe. Ring the bell button so you don't miss upcoming content. Who knows? Maybe we'll have to do a emergency response and addendum to this from Xbox News that just keeps the steam rolling and coming out here. And make sure that you are subscribed, though, for all of the upcoming content as well. I've got some pretty big NVIDIA, AMD, and Intel stuff coming soon that, of course, I've been hinting at. You're not going to want to miss it. And, support us on Patreon. We cannot do this without our patrons. Honestly, our stretch goal is to get to about 2,000 patrons, because if we get to 2,000, that's where we can just start hiring people to make sure stuff comes out a little earlier without ads to you, so that you never need to watch ads again. And the stable income that pays me, Dan, Gerard, Carbon Cry, our renderer, we have a renderer who's putting together, I won't say what renders up right now. Like, all of this stuff, it costs money, and remember, you're putting food on the table if you support us for just $2 a month. Not even asking for a cup of coffee. I'm asking for a can of tuna every month to support us, and it really does go a long way. And remember, Die Shrinks, a new one just came out looking at GPU and console economics. Another one just came out with like us getting really into the nitty gritty of what we think about the state of hardware reviewing in 2024. There's hundreds of ad-free pieces of content out there if you join us. And after the shilling is done, I will say thank you for watching. Thank you for listening, and have a good week, everybody.
Goodbye.
This podcast was brought to you by the YouTube channel and website Moore's Law is Dead. Moore's Law is Dead and Broken Silicon are trademarks of their creator, Tom. That guy is me, and I am indeed the creator, editor, writer, and showrunner of Moore's Law is Dead podcasts, videos, articles, and other media. However, it's not just me. Moore's Law is Dead is a team, with Broken Silicon co-hosted by my brother Dan, audio editing by Gerard Cortez, renders being done by the industrial designer Jean-Philippe Clermont, and special assistance is also provided by Carmen Cry and Carrie No Sugata as well. Find all of our information at www.mooreslawsdead.com on the about/support page. In the event you do want to hire me for consulting work, hire Gerard for audio work, hire Jean-Philippe for industrial design work, or you're interested in working with Carbon Cry or Carrie No Sugata as well. You can also find our long-term sponsors on that page if you want to show them some love for putting food on our tables. Or you can also mail us some love. You can send letters or hardware donations to the following address: Moore's Law is Dead, P.O. Box 60632 in Nashville, Tennessee, zip code 37206. Although, to be honest, the best way to show Moore's Law is Dead some love is to support us on Patreon. Patrons are what makes Moore's Law is Dead content truly possible. Every month, and really every day, depending on who you're talking about, me, Gerard, Dan, and Jean-Philippe are working tirelessly to provide a steady stream of content that we could not keep doing unless we knew the work was possible without being reliant on sponsors dictating every little thing we put out. Don't get us wrong. We love our sponsors, but we love directly working for you, our fans, much more. If you have any extra money, even a couple free dollars a month, consider supporting us directly on Patreon. Those couple of monthly dollars will get you access to the exclusive podcast Die Shrink, voting on subjects of future podcast episodes, the ability to ask guest questions, and of course, access to the Moore's Law is Dead Discord full of like-minded people who I am sure would love to meet you. I am one of them. Additionally, higher tiers get access to early, ad-free episodes of Broken Silicon, the ability to ask questions in all Broken Silicon episodes and Loose Ends live streams ahead of the recording, and the entire back catalog of Moore's Law is Dead podcasts, in addition to having thanks in the credits of videos and podcasts depending on the tier, with other perks available as well. And hey, if you cannot afford to support us directly every month, please do share Moore's Law is Dead videos and podcasts with friends and family, and on social media and websites like Reddit, and give Broken Silicon a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or your preferred podcast app of choice. All of this does really help us so much. But like I said, this podcast would not be possible without the patrons directly providing predictable and reliable support every month. And so now it is time to give a personal thanks to the greatest of the fans. The following supporters are at the 10 gigahertz or higher supported levels:
Brad Medlin, Drita Foles, Z Jits, Daniel D, Aaron Close, Jan Rano, Danielle Hyde, GZ Ziggy, Brian Riggleman, MJB1, Deke, Nicholas Buckner, SNES Chalmers, Jerem Ferreira, Valcom Alev, Jensen Wang, HardForum.com, Gregory S. Acker, Andrew S., Sarcastro, Evan Dingle, Chris Rich, Compress Earthbox, 3S Boy08, Al Buma, Greg Wanchuk, Shredberg, Dr. Foreman, Benjamin Cannon, Jonathan, Holden Mobley, Blake, Franco Frederic, Sammy Malas, Jake 223, Jake Martin, Jordan Simkovic, Slicky, Julian Leak, Boss Haas, Stefan Hart, Meat and Pork, Tim Robb, Ian Clifford, Travis Gooding, Stefan Toka, Mad, Zutsu Taylor, Stephen Coates, Michael McGee, Greg, Patrick Groh, Amiable Chief, Chrysantine, Tommy, Mark Mitchell, Ishad, Mark Raidmaker, The Eternal Dreamers, James Anderson, Cole Addict, Johnson N, Nithra Zink, Cameron, Wesley Sager, Henry Shang, Michelle Pell, D31337 Antics, Hexa Puma, Reginald R, Teak Autumn, Gaming Since Reagan, Jeff Stedler, Loophole 35, JSMMH, Windstar, James I Raider, Corey Leonard, Little Germany, Shay, Milton, Pulse Media, Jamie Witters, Dave Schultz, Melodic Warrior, Mac Daffy, Stephen Dick, Chuck Glidden, Brett Jones, Austin Haggerty, Justin Bustle, I711700K, Joe Foot, Hardland, Earth Taurus, Slushball, Jason Angima, Joseph Kelly, Samuel Park, Kim Sagung, Tails 2299, Neil Valverga, John Sisyphos, Dale Russell, The Forbidden Juice, Perleekman, Winwing, RB Racer, AC, Michael Cozy, Dr. J Mad, Alex Vega, Freedy, Brian Wright, John Swin, Angel of Cake, Joe Lamartina, Kikum, Albert Gunn, Solarize Eddie, Matthew Marlowe, Raisin Biscuit, Jeff Johnson, Penta Winter, Rowan McKickey, Cornster 671, Sprutnik, Jeffrey Gentleman, and of course, thank you to Sahara for the music.